Hello all you demons and happy Friday. I hope you all are ready because we're going to be looking at Nosferatu. No, not that one. No, not that one either. Yes, that one right there. Filmed in Germany in 1922, this low-budget film, I wasn't able to find the exact price, follows the events that transpire in the book Dracula with a few plot and character changes. By the way, really great book if you haven't read it. Totally suggest it. As of now, it is free on YouTube and has a runtime of only 1 hour and 21 minutes, so super worth it. If you guys want to watch that before this, I highly suggest it. But hey, without further ado, let's jump right into this movie. So immediately off the bat, we are not only given these dramatic title cards, but we are then welcomed to a beautiful, charming, silent film. They do an amazing job throughout showing us just how much love and craftsmanship went into these types of films, all the way down to its eerie musical score. The movie starts off by introducing 3 of our 4 main characters, Thomas and Ellen Hutter, and Knock. Count Olork, or Nosferatu, comes in a little later in the film. However, I want to focus on the character known as Knock. He is described as being Thomas's real estate boss and the subject of many rumors, and once you get a look at him, it becomes extremely obvious why. We are introduced to the character Knock by seeing him read what can only be described as a page from the Necronomicon. He gives Thomas the very unfortunate task of selling a house to a Mr. Count Olork. However, not just any house, the one directly across from Thomas's house. Oh, and better yet, the client, Count Olork, is described to be living in the land of specters and thieves. It just keeps getting better for Thomas. Now, I know a lot of us are thinking, no, why would I sell this house across from mine to a strange man who lives in a strange place from my strange boss? Not Thomas, though. He is so happy about this that he immediately runs home and starts packing his bag out of excitement. Now, reasonably, his wife is upset, but his expressions are showing none of that other than extreme manic amounts of joy. Thomas then says his goodbyes and he travels to his first desired town's tavern. Now, there, he's excited, asking for meals and looking insane as ever. Then he mentions Count Olork. That immediately puts the people in the tavern on high alert, and this older man approaches Thomas to warn him about Count Olork and the werewolf in the woods. Now, this is immediately when I started panicking, like, are we gonna see a werewolf in this film? And I just start, like, the thoughts start racing, like, is it gonna be in the woods? How's it gonna look? Turns out the werewolf in question was simply a hyena. Yeah, I guess it was just weird enough to make people go, yeah, okay, that's a werewolf. As Thomas is getting ready for bed later on, he comes across this book of the occult, from what it looks like, that warns him about specters and this Dracula-esque person, a vampire even, and he immediately shrugs it off and just sort of is like, yeah, whatever, I don't believe in these tales. Then, like a real badass in his sleepy time tea fit, he throws the book to the side and just simply laughs at it and goes to bed. The next day, Thomas continues with his journey, all the way up to a certain point that the men are just too superstitious and scared to go further from. There, he's just simply abandoned, waiting for someone or something, until a very unsuspicious and extremely kind driver comes up and picks up Thomas to take him the rest of the way to the castle. Nothing more than a simple, humble driver. We then bear witness to the most erratic and unintentionally comical scene. I'm sure back then they were like, whoa, those horses are going fast. Once they arrive to the castle, the driver mysteriously disappears, probably tending to the horses, but the man himself approaches. That's right, Nosferatu, looking drippy as hell with the feathers sticking out of his hat. Treat me like white teeth, don't get me dirty. Love on me. Now, I just want to take a moment to appreciate the costume department on this, because Nosferatu looks perfect. So that night, Count Olork and Thomas are just introducing themselves to each other, and Count Olork is, of course, looking very normal and very, human. while Thomas is using a knife like an absolute buffoon, and of course, because of that, he ends up cutting himself. Now, of course, we're immediately thinking, well, it was good knowing you, Thomas, but Count Olork is extremely polite by not immediately killing Thomas Hutter. However, there's still an awkward exchange there, but nonetheless, they brush it off and they go to the fireplace to have a nice little chat. This is when we see a really funny phase transition to the next morning where Hutter is still like in a corpse pose on the actual couch. And he notices these two small mosquito marks on his neck. Definitely nothing of concern, but he still takes note of it. But you know what's more distracting? The Denny's-style breakfast that Nosferatu has cooked up for Thomas Hutter. Now, what's funny and what I want to take note of is both in the book and this movie, both Nosferatu and Dracula just have these really extravagant meals ready for their guest. So that kind of insinuates that Dracula is a pretty accomplished chef to some degree. Thomas proceeds to have the most blessed morning and writes a note to his wife about how he's plagued by mosquitoes. Then proceeds to go help Nosferatu with taxes and showing him how to navigate the housing market. But of course, he's set on buying the one directly across from Thomas's house. But you know, that would be business as usual for Thomas. No, this is Count Olork. He proceeds to also make a very weird comment about Thomas's wife's neck. Fast forwarding to that night, Thomas has the most frightening interaction with Nosferatu. He goes to check outside of his door, to investigate this mysterious noise or suspicion he has, only to see him standing down the hall like this. Justifiably frightened, he cowers in the corner like a kid under the blankets and eventually just falls asleep like normal. I don't know how you're able to sleep after that, but hey, it's Thomas, man. And of course, he mysteriously wakes up with two small marks on his neck. Those pesky mosquitoes. Later that night, or the early morning the next day before the sun is up, I'm not sure where exactly, we see Thomas looking at Nosferatu pack himself and other coffins of dirt onto a wagon in a very creative mode style. Thomas watches all the way up until the point where Nosferatu seals himself in the coffin somehow. Not sure. And he has the horses drive him automatically. Noticing this, the race is afoot and Thomas immediately looks for an escape. He jumps out the window and passes out. Nosferatu is then able to safely travel to the Impusa. There the crew becomes slightly suspicious of the boxes that Nosferatu has, and they open one up only to find dirt and rats. So immediately being disturbed by the rats, they close it all up and they kind of ignore it for the rest of the sail until people start disappearing and dying. A tale is then spread around the ship of a passenger hiding in the holding area. A few dead bodies later, being thrown overboard. It is just the captain and the right-hand man facing Nosferatu. The movie then quickly cuts back to Thomas to show that he is now awake and realizes, oh, that was kind of a dumb idea. I gotta get home as soon as possible. He mounts a horse and then immediately begins speeding home. The ghost ship then makes port, Nosferatu fleeing the scene in almost a Looney Tunes goofy way, holding some awkwardly large boxes. Meanwhile, the townsfolk discover a haunting scene of the captain tied to the wheel, dead from a mysterious disease. While the townsfolk are distracted investigating this crime scene, Nosferatu, very, not awkwardly at all, carries his gigantic coffins of dirt back to his new home. As a matter of fact, these are so clunky and awkward that he doesn't even bother with his front door. He just teleports in. Miraculously, we see Thomas pull up to his house the same day to embrace his wife and to be welcomed back home. However, it's not all good. That night, they not only get to see their brand new lovely neighbor through the window, but shortly after, a mysterious plague is spread by rats in the town. At first thinking it's the plague brought by the ghost ship, then immediately not thinking it's that, the townsfolk very logically jump to the conclusion of it being, Knock. They then hunt him down in the most Looney Tunes fashion I have ever seen, with Knock even climbing on top of roofs of houses. Yeah, I don't know why, but throughout the movie, he is just so weirdly upper body strong. Yeah, he'll be doing bar lifts where his body is completely off the ground, and at one point he even comes down from one of the roofs using a sign and does a full pull down. He's just super fit for an old man, I guess. Oh, and while the townsfolk are hunting him down, they come across a poor, unsuspecting scarecrow who they think is Knock, but isn't, so they logically react by physically assaulting this scarecrow and just tearing him apart. I don't know what he did to upset them other than just do his job, but that's the real victim in this movie. Now, jumping back to our main three, Nosferatu, Thomas, and Ellen, we discover that Ellen has figured out that Nosferatu is actually the cause of all of this plague, but also that she has to distract him till the sun comes up. Knowing what must be done, she embroiders her final goodbye on a tapestry, simply saying, "I love you," and goes to the window to entice Nosferatu to come over. Here we get one of probably the coolest, most cinematic scenes of Nosferatu creeping up the stairwell. I think that one's the most iconic scene throughout the entire movie. At this moment, Thomas is away to go grab a doctor because Ellen had sent him on that side quest to distract him, and Nosferatu comes up to drink her blood. We get this scene where Thomas is rushing back home and we see the sun slowly start to come up, and eventually it does. Nosferatu, caught up in his bloodlust, doesn't realize that it's actually morning. He is then hit with the sun's rays and has his dramatic death scene. Just as Thomas enters the scene and sees his poor dead wife there on the bed, the plague is then lifted from the town at the poor sacrifice of Ellen, and thus ends the movie Nosferatu. Having read the book, there is a lot of really awesome stuff that was kind of just grazed over or completely missed, like some characters and plot points, but of course, the book is always going to be better than the movie. I purposely made sure not to mention a lot of different things that happened in this movie that were either funny, cool, or creepy, just because I wanted you guys to experience it for yourself firsthand. I think that it's very much worth it, and an hour and 21 minutes. But thank you all so much for watching. If you guys enjoyed this movie review, I have a few others on this channel that I think you would very much enjoy. And while you're at it, why not subscribe for more funny, spooky content like this? I just recently started these movie reviews, and I have been loving them. They're just really fun, for lack of a better description. But anyways, as always, everybody, stay spooky. Bye-bye.